Well, welcome to the second Erica webinar about Connect for Children. Connect for Children is a non-profit based in the Netherlands that is aiming to accelerate the development of paediatric studies to allow more medicines to be available for babies, children and young people. Our starting point is that good research requires infrastructure, and this means that we can do things in the same way multiple times and stop ourselves reinventing the wheel. At the moment, Europe is fragmented and not sufficiently developed to do clinical research in rare diseases or for children and young people. The new partnership, ERDERA, and hopefully the realised IHI project will do a lot of good work to support clinical research, but these projects won't deliver the clinical research. So c4c has been developing ways to deliver clinical research that will make it easier for sites and sponsors and academics to do research. We started as a public-private partnership between 36 academic groups and 10 pharmaceutical companies as part of an innovative health initiative project. And over the past 6 years, we've co-developed some ways of working to make clinical research easier. We work through national hubs, shown on the map here, and these groups come together to support research in their country. While each rare disease area is different, there are some things that are the same whether you have an eye disease, a bone disease, or an endocrine disease. And those consistencies, those things that are the same, depend upon what happens in your country, what happens in your language. And so to speed up the work across all the rare diseases, we have these national hubs who work in these countries in the native languages to help with ethics and other agencies. We work with a large number of children, young people and families, helped by experts, as Pamela is going to tell us. We work with more than 400 experts in clinical science and innovative methodologies. We've mentioned the national hubs, and together we work with a large number of high-quality trial-related sites. Many of these are within European reference networks, but some of them aren't. And so by working with c4c, academics and sponsors can work with as many trial sites as possible. It's quicker to work with c4c than it is to work with industry. We can deliver expert advice within 3 months of signing a work order, and that contrasts with standard practice across industry, which might be 8 or 9 months. We can find sites within a month, and we can do detailed protocol-driven site feasibility within a confidentiality agreement within a couple of weeks. Again, this is much quicker than academics and industry normally work. We receive requests from academics and industry that go to the single point of contact, which are then shared out between the right service: the patient and public involvement, expert advice, site identification and feasibility, and ongoing trial support. And these are facilitated by education and training and work on paediatric data standards. All of these are hosted by our sustainable non-profit, which is Connect for Children Stichting, based in the Netherlands. Today, we're going to talk about patient and public involvement, which is an essential part of clinical research, particularly when working with children, young people and their families. We're going to talk about paediatric data standards, and we're going to start with expert advice, how we can help speed up the development of protocols and paediatric investigation plans, how we can avoid problems that show up early in the trial, maybe saving 1 or 2 amendments to speed up the trials. So that's the introduction. Thank you very much for joining. We have another webinar that's on the Erica website about what the sites do and about our educational offer. But today, let's get started with expert advice, and I'll hand you over to Fenna. Thank you, Fenna.
Yeah, so thank you, Mark, for handing over to me. And I would like to share some information about the c4c expert advice service that we have set up. When should you be able to come for advice? Well, you can come for advice as soon as you have an idea. So you can come at the stage of a grant proposal when you are preparing to submit, or you can come when you are fine-tuning or developing your protocol, but even about when you're amending a protocol. For industry, they come for advice when they are working on PIP development, but also PIP adjustments, or even protocol development or protocol amendments. So anywhere throughout the research cycle, you can come for advice. How does it work when you would like to come for advice? Well, requesters contact c4c and we will set up an initial interview, initial meeting. We call it a scoping interview, to talk about the specifics of your request and how we can support you with that request. So what are the needs that you have? When we have identified those needs, we will reach out to our expert network, on which I will tell a little bit more in the next few slides, and we will select the best suited experts for your specific requests. We will get them together in an advisory board meeting, make sure that all the questions are addressed and all insights are shared, and we will provide an advisory report to the requester summarizing all the things that have been discussed and the advice that has been given by the c4c experts. So as stated, to be able to provide this service, we have set up a network of experts. We have a lot of experts, over 400 throughout Europe. Some of the experts are also part of ERNs, some of them aren't. So it's quite broad. We have not focused on a specific disease area, but we have quite a broad range of clinical experts on different areas of disease, but we also have methodology experts like study design ethics, statisticians, or HTAs experts, mainly throughout Europe and some of them abroad. The type of experts that we provide, we have divided in 3 main categories, under which there are different subcategories. So we have the innovative methodology experts, we have the clinical experts, but we also have the patient-parent experts, on which Pamela will share a little bit more in the next part of this webinar. One of the things that we have set up within C4C, which is quite unique and has been perceived as an added value for both the requesters as well as the experts out of our network contributing to advice, is a so-called centralized contracting structure. That means that the requester will gain an agreement with the Connect for Children, with the C4C Stichting, and we as Stichting already have master consultancy agreements with all our experts. This will result in a quicker turnaround and a reduced load of bureaucracy in getting agreements signed, because, well, as most of you might know, there's always a lot of going back and forward on the same clauses about, for example, identity or liability. All those things are already covered in the master agreements that are in place, and thus we can move forward with a work order, which is easy to get arranged, and thus saving a lot of additional work and recurrent work. And as a result, we have a more efficient process. As Mark has said, we can reduce the average from 36 weeks to 12 weeks for a request for advice. If we go to the numbers of the advices that have been requested thus far via Connect for Children, we have had a little bit over 60 advice requests from industry as well as academia. 42 of those have been completed and 7 are currently ongoing. Some of them did not proceed due to different reasons. For example, new data becoming available and thus a process being put on hold or even stopped. When we go into how many of these advices are related to rare diseases, approximately 56% of the requests we have received are within the area of rare diseases. Luckily, most of the children are healthy, so a lot of the pediatric advices have to do with rare diseases. The feedback that we have received, because we set up this process and we thought it was important to keep improving and to make sure that there is a need for the service that has been set up. So we collected feedback from the people that requested advice, as well as from the expert that participated in the advice process via C4C. So the overall feedback received was positive. The centralized contracting structure has been perceived very efficient and well, as a very positive point, because it makes a lot of hard discussions less redundant. Also getting feedback that C4C has been set up and has reached the status of a very professional organization, as well as providing high quality input. But also from the experts, we had the feedback that they really felt heard and felt valued. This goes for the patients and parents that provided input, but also for the clinical and methodology experts. They really felt heard and valued for their insights and felt that their advice was taken into account. So what's the benefits to have this service available for the pediatric rare disease community? Well, by going via a single point of contact, you can get combined insights with experts out of different areas. So it could be experts from relevant specialty networks, but also from methodologists or clinical outside of a specific specialty network. The patient and family input on acceptability, feasibility, and a lot of other topics is included and can be included throughout the process. You will receive logistical support and knowledge of the methodologies on the best way to set up an advisory board that meets the specifics of your request. We will be reducing timelines, as well as a lot of bureaucracy with the contracting structure. It's a one-stop shop. Just by sending one email, you have access to the full range of advice service that is offered and the full range of expertise that is there. We also see it as an opportunity for C4C and the rare disease community to collaborate, to see what's out there and how can we strengthen each other and make sure that we provide the best service with, of course, the aim to achieve the best treatment for children. And of course, with everything that we do, the medical need of the children is at the foreground. So if you want to connect with us, these are the details. And then for now, I will hand over to Pamela to tell you a little bit more about the patient and public involvement. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Fenna. And I'm going to give you a more detailed description of the patient, parent and young person's involvement service that you can access through C4C. The European Young Persons Advocacy Group Network is a consortium of experts who facilitate meaningful patient and public involvement with children, young people and families across Europe. We work in partnership with not only patients, parents and young people, but also patient associations, industry and academic researchers. And our purpose is to provide patient and public involvement advice and solutions to ensure that paediatric clinical research is always patient-centred. The European Young Persons Advocacy Group Network is an umbrella organisation, and it has membership and accessibility to young persons advocacy group networks and PPI groups across Europe. And in fact, we have expertise across 14 countries. The founders and the steering group of the committee are myself, Jen Preston, Siglin Gaillard and Begonia Nafria, and we come from France, the UK and Spain. What's specific about eYPAGnet is that we are experts that are also embedded in clinical research. We have professionals who work within the children's hospitals and in the clinical research facilities. We work alongside clinicians and research nurses that are at the core of conducting the clinical trials in all paediatric specialties, and also that includes rare diseases. But we also have a direct link with patients and parent organisations, and we can collaborate with them. And there we have extensive experience in all phases of clinical trials, but also longitudinal studies, non-drug interventions, and medical device research. And I think our main, the uniqueness of our expertise is that we can develop and deliver bespoke PPI plans that meet the needs of the client, but are also tailored to working with children, young people and families. And they're always consistent with our core values. We can work with patients and parents living with paediatric diseases, whether that's chronic diseases or children who might have experienced an acute event. We can work with young persons advocacy group networks, but also patient organisations, clinical research networks, the international research networks, hospitals, etc. So we work with all stakeholders that are involved in paediatric research. I mentioned the core values. Well, our core values all stem around ensuring that our involvement is very ethical, that we ensure patients are informed of the actions that are implemented, so we feed back to them and a report on the activities and what's happened as a result of their activity. They are reimbursed for their time and their expertise at a fair market value. Our engagement is inclusive, so we make sure that we can adapt our methodology to ensure that we can work with people at their ability level and that they have access to any information they require to make sure their contribution is valuable. And we create a very supportive and child-friendly environment. The portfolio of services that we can provide. So we can provide study-specific report, so looking at the co-design of trial protocols, patient-reported outcomes, patient-reported experiences, etc. We can look at not only the developing of those problems, but also how we capture that information. We can look at the development and review of patient documentation, whether or not that's in a paper format or in an electronic format. But we can also look at the co-creation and the development of the training that's required for key stakeholders and educational resources that might be supplied or given to children and families who are part of the clinical trial. We can develop the PPI plan. We can make sure, as I said, that that is very bespoke, but also meets the budgetary and time requirements of the sponsor. And we can also facilitate and execute those PPI plans with the young people and their families. And we can, one thing that's really important is that we evaluate and assess the impact of that assessment. So whether or not that's looking at an impact assessment of the activities or accessing co-created reporting tools. So how we will work with C4CS. So Fenna has given you an outline of the role and the function of the Secretariat, and what eYPAGnet will do is we'll initially have a scoping meeting with the sponsor where we'll look at the needs assessment. So we'll look at the time that the sponsor needs to have that activity completed by, we'll look at the budgetary requirements, and we'll look at what is required to get meaningful engagement. So what are the expected outcomes of that engagement with the families? We can then deliver the PPI plan, and that will involve recruiting the patients, the parents, the eYPAGs, or the patient organisations. We will set up contracts with them. We'll set up our confidentiality agreement and gain their consent, and we'll arrange the fair market value reimbursement. And once we have a scope at that first scoping meeting, we can decide whether or not you want to do that in one country or several countries, and where we have PPI networks set up there to fully engage with that process. And then, of course, we'll have the final report will be sent back via the C4CS, and we'll also feed back the impact of that assessment to our PPI participants. So what are the advantages of working with us? As Fenna outlined, there's a single point of contact with C4CS with the sponsor. And then we have a single point of contact with eYPAGnet for the participants in the PPI activities. So that resolves any issues of companies having to contract or pay patients directly. We can agree the fair market value for the patients and the parents and the professionals involved in the activities. We can look at recruitment issues. We can address how we find those patients through our patient organisations or through our contacts within the hospitals. And we can overcome language barriers and make sure that we can include patients from different countries and cultures and ensure there's diversity within that PPI activity. And thank you very much for your attention. And I will now pass you on to Becca, who will outline the services for data.
Hello, my name is Rebecca Leary and I'm one of the work package leads of Work Package 5, the Data Harmonisation and Standardisation work package based at Newcastle University. So what I want to talk to you about today is the approach that c4c has taken to data harmonisation and data sharing. So go back to basics first. Why do we think as c4c that this is important? Why should we share data? And despite the scientific advances, the medicine's advantage, all of the work that we've done so far, safety and efficacy data on the use of medicines in children is still very scarce. If we had more data, we would have more information. If we had more information, we could use that to gain knowledge. And with that knowledge, we could develop better and more efficient trials that are less likely to fail, ultimately resulting in better medicines. There's an increasing awareness about the importance of data sharing, more culturally acceptable among both clinicians and industry, and particularly it's becoming important in publicly funded research to make sure that your data is shared afterwards. There's been several regulators, research bodies and learned societies and FPIA who've all published recently on the importance and the principles and challenges of data sharing and reuse. There are a number of large repositories now available, many funded by industry, for people to deposit their data at the end of studies. And this is all of the kind of work that we're trying to encourage through our work in c4c. So to make sure that the data that is shared is useful, we need to think about standardizing it. And that's because data standards provide structure and meaning to data, both for humans, but also for machines and computers that have to share and analyze the data. By standardizing the data, it makes it easier to reuse and allows for interoperability and pooling of data. And all of our work that we've done within c4c has been around adhering to the FAIR data principles. That's data that's findable, accessible, interoperable and reusable, something I know that's very familiar among the rare disease community. At the beginning of c4c, we had a challenge to understand which standards we should use. There's many different data standards organizations out there, but as c4c is predominantly a clinical trial project focused on improving the infrastructure for paediatric clinical trials, we put our focus on CDISC standards. And that's because the CDISC standards are mandated by several regulatory bodies globally, including the FDA and recommended by the EMA. So CDISC stands for Clinical Data Interchange Standards Consortium, and c4c included CDISC as one of the partners at the beginning of the project to allow us to work together to develop globally recognized standards for paediatrics. So our first solution to help people share and reuse paediatric data was to standardize it. And you can use the QR code here on the screen to take you to the paediatric user guide that we developed with CDISC. It'll require a login to CDISC, but it's completely free. And if you follow that link, it'll take you to the CDISC user guide. So to develop the paediatric user guide, it was a very long process. It took us over 2 years. And we decided at the beginning it would be impossible to focus on all paediatric data ever collected in any clinical trial. There's just too much data, too many different options there. So we focused very much on cross-cutting, frequently used data items from clinical trials that were used across the paediatric age ranges. And we brought together a group of volunteers, experts from c4c and for CDISC to work together, and we held weekly calls for 26 months. So it was a very long process. Firstly, the process for developing standards includes scoping and planning. And it's really important that experts from paediatricians and people who deliver clinical trials worked alongside experts in data standardization and modeling to develop standards that made sense for clinicians. So this process was followed, and as I say, it took over 2 years, included public review and review by the FDA. I know that it'll be too small to read everything on the screen here, but this was just to give a visual image of all of the different kinds of data that we looked at, all of the different cross-cutting items that were considered. Some of them already had standards that existed for adults that were suitable for children, for example, date of birth, but there were some new data items that had never been developed before in the data standards, for example, total body length, which is a more paediatric focused data item. So the ones in red were really the ones that we focused very much on in our journey with CDISC to make added value by having data items specifically for paediatrics that didn't currently exist in the standards. So this is just what the paediatric user guide looks like, and it'll give you an idea of all of the different kind of topics that are covered. As I say, they're all cross-cutting, so it's things about how to standardize data about the subject, but also how to standardize data about the birth, which includes the mother, which I'll come on to in a minute. We also have data items about demographics, growth and development, vital signs, feeding, diet, and then some body system assessments that are very specific to paediatrics. We also work with the expert groups of C4C who helped us to understand which questionnaires, ratings and scales were most used in paediatric clinical trials, and we also standardized those as well. So I just want to give an example here to try and explain a little bit more why it's so important. So in our calls with the experts, we realized that the representation of pregnancy and birth data was quite challenging in response to data standardization, because data can include information that is both about the mother, about the fetus, or about the mother and the fetus. So without standardization, there can be a loss of meaning in this data and a lack of understanding about what we're really talking about here. So what we had to do was do what we call a concept map, where we work together with the experts to really break down everything that happens in pregnancy and birth. So we have subjects like the mother and the fetus in here. We have observations or results or something that happens like the pregnancy, the outcome of the pregnancy, the gestation of the fetus. And then alongside this concept map, you can see lots of, in this sort of beige color, variables and terminologies. And this is where the standardization comes in. And only by building a model like this are we able to really convert this into a standard that has the structure that follows the CDISC rules. So once you have this concept map, you can't really use this very easily in a clinical trial. So this has to be converted into a tabulation standard. And this is where this probably looks more familiar to people who are doing the clinical research. So we have here what we call domains within CDISC, and we have the associated person where we can catch information about the mother, and the subject where we can catch information about the child. And then we have these more complicated tables at the bottom where we're collecting information both about the mother and the child. But births are further complicated by multiple births. So within the standards, there are also instructions and guidance on how to report on a multiple pregnancy. So all of this is written up in the paediatric user guide with many, many more examples of how to implement it in a clinical trial. Okay, so that was our first solution for how to share data. And the second one was about applying the FAIR data principles, which I spoke about earlier. And I don't want to say too much about this other than please go to this QR code and visit what we call our FAIR recipe, because we work with another big IMI project called FAIR Plus, who have a suite of different recipes, tools and solutions for verifying research data. And we focus this one on paediatric metadata. So that's data about clinical trials in children. And if you use this QR code here, you can read the recipe and understand how to apply that maybe to your own data. Our third solution was really about reusing data that exists in the real world, particularly in electronic health records. And we've just finished a research study within C4C to look at how feasible it is to link data in electronic health records with clinical trial data to improve the planning and delivery of trials. And we used 2 case studies, including rare disease neurofibromatosis, to do this work. And the publication is expected later this year. But the early results show, probably not unsurprising to many in the webinar, that there's a lack of coding in electronic health records, a huge diversity in the computer systems used, and gaps in disease-specific data. So I think there's a bit more work to be done in this area. The final solution really is to share learning. So something that we've developed as a result of c4c is the Global Paediatric Data Forum, or the GLOPAD. And the idea of this forum is to avoid duplication in the field, to stop us recreating new data standards for the same diseases over and over again, to stop registries being recreated and duplicated, and also to share ideas for how to deal with the challenges, particularly of data in small populations like paediatric and rare diseases. So if people are interested in hearing more about the GLOPAD or potentially joining, my contact details are on the slides, and you're welcome to get in touch and find out more. And finally, I just want to share more QR codes because I hope that you can have a look. The one on the left takes you to the c4c publications website, where you can see all of the c4c publications, and a lot of them are our data publications that we've done about this work, about how we've built the standards and why it's important. But we've also had a new publication just last week about our approach to disease-specific data, which I think will be very interesting to many of the eRN colleagues. We've also just recently published this week, but I don't have a QR code yet, but it'll go on the website, another publication about the importance of repositories and how to find repositories that are suitable for paediatric data. So I hope I've given you an overview of the kind of activities that we've been doing to really encourage the reuse of that precious paediatric data. Thank you very much, and here's my email address. Please feel free to get in touch.
Becca, if I look at the question sections, there's a question for you, whether you could provide again the link to the CDISC page.
Yep, I'll drop that in the chat now. Thank you. So I think maybe was Mark supposed to be managing this session, but it looks like he's having some technical problems.
Yeah, I think he was. So that's why I was checking the question page. I don't see any other questions at this stage. So I will also check the chat. Yes, Mark, I will do, no problem. So we also have a question in the chat. And I think this is one for our technical support. There's somebody from Australia where the internet connection is bad, and she's wondering whether there's a way to review the content after this webinar. So let's please, we will look into that and get an answer to you as quickly as possible. Ah, perfect. It's already in the chat, so it can indeed be reread on the Erica website. So it's already shared with Jan. Thank you very much, Mari. Sorry.
And somebody's also asking if the slides will be sent after the talk. So I think they should be available on that link that you already posted.
Yeah, indeed. So with regards indeed to the 2 questions that are there, the slides you can see via the link that's currently in the chat. And also the link to the CDIX page has been put in the chat, so that both questions have a direct link to the answer.
I'll pop it in the question Q&A section as well.
Perfect, thanks.
If I can. Oh, we've lost Mark completely now.
Yeah, but he already sent a text that he had some issues, so whether we could take over. I'm checking whether there are some additional new questions. So for the people on the log, please don't be shy to ask the questions via the question sections at this stage. And also, if you go to the recording of this webinar and look at the presentation, you see the contact details from all of us. So if you have some afterthought, you can always send a direct email to us as well. I don't see any new questions in either chat or the question section. Just double checking that I didn't miss anything. I know that Pam is also like looking.
Can we see how many people are on the webinar? Because perhaps they're going to be watching the recording and they're not here.
I have in my screen I see 21 connected people. So let's give people a few moments to formulate the question if there are any, and maybe we were very clear and there were no questions. That could also, of course, be the case. And as stated, if you have any questions afterwards, our contact details are in the presentation. So definitely feel free to contact us. I don't see any questions popping up anymore. Don't get me wrong, I'm more than happy to stay on for the remainder of the time. But of course, if people have no other questions, then we also don't want to keep you. There is also a comment in the chat. And I think, Jana, it's addressed to you. It's from Mark, that we can always link with you directly for a dedicated call to provide you with any information if preferred. So definitely not a problem to reach out to you and schedule a separate call. I see Jana is typing, so I'm just gonna wait a little while. And of course, this offer is not only for Jana, but also for other people on the call that would like to have a one-on-one or a direct contact with us to talk about more possibilities for collaboration, etc. Definitely, that's an option. Perfect. Thanks, Jana. It was indicated that a new question will be launched in the question section. So we are waiting for for it to pop up for us so that we can answer the question. And Mark is back as well. I'm checking with Rebecca and Pamela. I don't see a question popping up yet. Just making sure I don't miss it. And you and I, okay, perfect. Okay, it doesn't seem to pop up, so I'm just checking with my colleague presenters. Is there anything you would like to say or add at this stage?
I'd just like to say that if anyone does have any questions, then they're more than welcome to contact us. It can be a very general question or a more specific question about a particularly paediatric population that you work with. And we're happy to have that on any informal basis at all.
Yeah, and there's also a question addressed to you in the question section now. So from the patient perspective, I find myself translating clinical language to lame language terms for people who do not have a medical or clinical background. Is this an issue others often encounter in their respective fields?
Well, I suppose that's one of the purposes of having patient public involvement, is that you make sure that your patients that you're working with do understand the language. And I think it's only appropriate to translate into lay terms, because very often when you're speaking to patients about a clinical trial, they're also maybe just had a recent diagnosis, or the parents have received a recent diagnosis for that child, and the things can always be quite a little bit in shock. So it's very important that the language we use is appropriate. It's also age appropriate as well as ability appropriate. And so that's really one of the purposes of patient public involvement, is that you can make sure that you're giving the information that you think you're giving.
Thank you very much, Pam, for that answer. And I hope, Jana, that's a sufficient answer for your question.
Of course, one of the advantages of working with eYPAGnet via c4c is that we can translate that into different languages as well. So it's always, sometimes Google Translate doesn't give you the correct terminology that might be used by a family or a child. So by working with local teams, we can make sure that that is translated into the appropriate language.
Okay, I see that Mark is also typing an add-on. He's unable to unmute at this stage, so that's why his response will be in the chat, and so it should pop up at any moment as well. And I think indeed it's helpful that you always need to translate from clinical language to layman terms or layman language, and having people like our PPI expert facilitators that have done that multiple times as a source for help with all their experience is a real added value.
Yeah, because it's not only language and clinical terms, but it's also how the information might be interpreted by somebody. So it might be ambiguous where you don't realise it's ambiguous, or the information that you're explaining, that you're giving them about a clinical trial, doesn't give them all the information that they feel that they need to make an informed decision. So that is really why it's essential, I would say, to ensure that your patient information sheets and your patient documentation is reviewed by people, families and children of the appropriate age and with that condition. I don't know if Mark is typing or he's just maybe hovering over the bar. Mark, are you able to unmute yourself? No.
No. We just got a text that he doesn't have any additional comments at this stage. So thanks, Mark. I don't see any additional questions from anybody either. So then, if there are also no other comments from Rebecca or Pamela, no, then I think I would like to thank everybody for joining this webinar. It was an honor to be able to share our experience with you, and hopefully there's a potential to collaborate with future work. So please feel free to reach out to us.
Oh, there's somebody typing.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you very much, and hopefully we'll meet soon.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Goodbye.